In today's English lesson, we are going to watch a news clip about some recent flooding that happened in Asheville, North Carolina. During that news clip, you will hear lots of English phrasal verbs, some idioms, and some advanced vocabulary. I will explain the difficult vocabulary with pictures, definitions, and example sentences. But before we get to that, I just want to say that if you have been affected by a natural disaster like a flood or an earthquake or a hurricane, my heart goes out to you. It's a rough deal. I've experienced that. I've had flooding happen to me. My house has flooded before. You may have seen it. I have had a house destroyed by a tornado. The entire neighborhood around me was destroyed. Or if you have been affected by something man-made, like war, my heart also goes out to you. The next story I cover for an English lesson will probably have something to do with war. Iran attacked Israel just a few hours ago. There is lots of sadness around the world, and I'm sorry for that. Last week, Vanessa from Speak English with Vanessa released an English lesson where she brought together some of the biggest YouTube teachers. Bob the Canadian, English with Lucy. I was honored to be part of it. Sadly, Vanessa lives in the town we are going to talk about, Asheville, North Carolina. I don't think she will watch this, but I am thinking of her today. I reached out. That's an English phrasal verb meaning I made contact. I sent an email. She said her family was safe. Check out her channel. I will leave a link to that video she did about becoming a better English speaker with all of those amazing English teachers. It'll be at the end of this lesson. There's also a link in the description. Let's take a look at that news clip, and I'll be right back to teach some English.
People still unaccounted for following Hurricane Helene. The death toll across the southeast rising to at least 133 people. In some communities, drinking water is scarce and gas is in short supply. Just look at that long line in hard-hit Asheville, North Carolina. And that's where our Faith Abube is for us this morning. Good morning, Faith.
Yeah, good morning to you, Robin. Some people here without food, power, or water are growing desperate by the minute.
Desperate. They mentioned desperate. Take a look at that picture. That person looks desperate. When someone really needs help or is in a bad situation. Many people were desperate for food after Hurricane Helene hit Asheville. Should we take a look at a map to see where Asheville, North Carolina is? It is in the mountains. I have never been there, but I have heard that it is beautiful. Unfortunately, it sounds like at least 138 people have died as a result of Hurricane Helene. Later on in the news story, we will hear about a man, John, who has lost his wife. Very, very sad. This is what is so scary. There are many people unaccounted for. That means when someone is missing and no one knows where they are. Hopefully, it's because so many people in the area don't have power. They don't have internet. It is hard to make a phone call or send a text message. Hopefully, once power is restored, those people will be accounted for and they will be found safe and sound. Let's look at a sentence that has unaccounted for in it. Several people are still unaccounted for after the hurricane passed through the town.
People still unaccounted for following Hurricane Helene. The death toll across the southeast rising to at least 133 people.
None of this is fun to talk about, but this is especially not fun. Death toll. It means the number of people who died because something bad. The death toll from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina is still rising as rescue teams continue their search. The death toll from Hurricane Helene in North Carolina is still rising as rescue teams continue their search.
In some communities, drinking water is scarce and gas is in short supply. Just look at that long line.
Communities. These are groups of people living in the same area. And from what I have experienced, when a tragedy hits a community, those people come together, they help each other, and I hope that is what is happening in the communities that were hit by Hurricane Helene. Let's use it in a sentence. Many communities in the path of Hurricane Helene were flooded. Scarce. Scarce, it means when something is hard to find. And for the picture, I used a desert. And you can imagine in a desert, water is scarce. But let's talk about Hurricane Helene and scarce. After the hurricane, clean water became scarce in affected areas.
In some communities, drinking water is scarce and gas is in short supply. Just look at that long line.
The news clip also says in short supply. In short supply and scarce are really similar. They're almost the same. It means when there is not enough of something. In Asheville, food and clean drinking water was in short supply after the storm. And in the picture, you can see there is an empty grocery shelf. The sign says 1 per customer, meaning you could only buy one of whatever was on that shelf.
Yeah, good morning to you, Robin. Some people here without food, power, or water are growing desperate by the minute. In fact, we saw a couple of people along this road yesterday who were so desperate that they were going through the storm debris, trying to find any kitchen item they can find so they can put it over an open fire and cook something to eat.
Going through. This is a phrasal verb that can be used in many ways, but in the news clip, it meant looking for something. Rescue teams are going through the debris to find survivors. Survivors, people who lived through the storm. Debris, we will talk about in the next one. In the picture, a raccoon is going through the trash to find food. Debris is the next one. I know it ends with an S, but we don't pronounce it. Debris. Pieces of broken things that are left after a disaster. The streets were filled with debris after Hurricane Helene passed through. An open fire. Take a look at the picture. That is an open fire. You can imagine without power or electricity, no one would be able to run their stove or oven. Without those stoves or ovens, people would have to cook their dinner over an open fire. Let's get the official definition. A fire that is burning without any covering. Some people were cooking on an open fire after their homes were damaged.
After Hurricane Helene left torrential flooding and landslides like this one in Boone, North Carolina in its wake.
My car's gone.
Residents scrambling this morning to locate loved ones as the search and rescue mission intensifies across parts of the Southeast.
Torrential, very strong and heavy, usually about rain. Torrential rain from Hurricane Helene flooded many homes. Landslide. Take a look at the picture. That is what a landslide is. Literally, when land is sliding down a mountain. When dirt and rocks fall down a hill. The heavy rain caused a landslide in the mountains near Asheville.
After Hurricane Helene left torrential flooding and landslides like this one in Boone, North Carolina in its wake.
My car's gone.
Residents scrambling this morning to locate loved ones as the search and rescue mission intensifies across parts of the Southeast.
This can be a little difficult in its wake. You might hear, oh, wake up. I wake up at 7 every morning. This is a different kind of wake. What is left behind after something has passed? Take a look at that picture. A boat is going by in the water. The waves behind that boat are called its wake. Here is a sentence using wake. The hurricane left destruction in its wake. Scrambling. This is never good. Moving quickly and in a hurry because of panic. Maybe you are late for work and you are scrambling around. I will use it with an English phrasal verb. You are scrambling around the house trying to find your phone and your keys. Here's a sentence at the bottom of the screen. People were scrambling to leave their homes when the flood waters started rising. I want to talk about two different terms, search and rescue and search and recovery. Search and rescue is a lot better than search and recovery. What is search and rescue? Teams that look for people who are in danger and try to save them. Rescue, save, both mean the same thing here. Search and rescue teams are working day and night to find survivors. Search and recovery, not so fun. That usually happens a couple days after a disaster when they don't think survivors will be found. They are just recovering bodies. Teams that look for people who have died. After a few days, search and recovery teams began finding victims in the debris. I am recording this English lesson only a couple days after Hurricane Helene went through Asheville, so I think search and rescue teams are still out trying to find survivors. In a couple days, those search and rescue teams will be called search and recovery. It is always sad when that name changes.
Residents scrambling this morning to locate loved ones as the search and rescue mission intensifies across parts of the Southeast. The collision of these two homes among the horrific and widespread destruction across 6 states, flash flooding and mudslides devastating the mountains of western North Carolina.
Collision. In the news clip, 2 houses collided. That's the verb, collide. The noun is collision. When 2 things crash into each other. The verb is collide. There was a collision with 2 houses in the river during the storm. Horrific. It's an adjective. Describes something very bad and shocking. The horrific damage from the hurricane shocked everyone in the community. There's that word again, community, like town, city, neighborhood. Those are all types of communities. Flash flood. I'm hoping you know what a flood is, but what's a flash flood? A sudden flood that happens quickly after a lot of rain. A flash flood swept through parts of Asheville after the torrential rain.
Flash flooding and mudslides devastating the mountains of western North Carolina. The former bustling town of Chimney Rock now turned into rubble. The residents there vowing to rebuild.
The next one is rubble. Rubble. It's a lot like debris. Broken pieces of buildings or structures. People were searching through the rubble to find their belongings. Very sad. Belongings means things they own. Vowing. It's a really strong promise. In the picture, let me make that a little bigger. In English, we say people make their wedding vows. It's like a promise to love each other until death do them part, we say. Vowing, promising strongly to do something. The mayor is vowing to rebuild the town after the hurricane.
The former bustling town of Chimney Rock now turned into rubble. The residents there vowing to rebuild.
The life in Chimney Rock is strong, okay? Like the rocks, boulders may be moved, but we will come back together.
Survivors of the storm growing more desperate for food and water since Helene barreled through.
This is a great phrasal verb to know. Barreling through, moved through quickly and with great force. If you look at that picture, you could say that that train is barreling through town. Barreling through is not always a bad thing, but of course here it was a bad thing. The hurricane barreled through Asheville. Here's a sentence. The words are on the screen. Hurricane Helene barreled through the mountains, leaving destruction behind. We could also say leaving destruction in its wake.
Survivors of the storm growing more desperate for food and water since Helene barreled through.
We haven't had power, water, very low on food.
Gas lines a mile long.
We are continuing to ramp up pushes of commodities, particularly water and MREs, as well as fuel and other resources into the impacted communities.
Ramp up. In the picture, it's a ramp. It's like flat stairs. If you had a wheelchair, you could get up a ramp. You probably could not get upstairs. But what does the English phrasal verb ramp up mean? To increase or get stronger. The rescue efforts ramped up as more people were found missing. Commodities. Commodities are basic goods like food, water, or fuel. After the hurricane, commodities like water and gas were hard to find. We could also say they were scarce or they were in short supply. MREs. That is an acronym. The M stands for a word, the R and the E. What does it mean? Meals ready to eat, usually given during emergencies. The military will also use MREs when fighting in a battle. It's food that is really easy to prepare. The National Guard, we will talk about them in just a minute. The National Guard distributed MREs to people who couldn't cook after the storm.
We haven't had power, water, very low on food.
Gas lines a mile long.
We are continuing to ramp up pushes of commodities, particularly water and MREs, as well as fuel and other resources into the impacted communities.
Hundreds still unaccounted for, like Julie LaRoe.
If anybody's seen her or knows anything, please let somebody know.
She and her fiance, John Norwood, sought shelter at a neighbor's house when Helene hit, but a mudslide took out the home.
We looked outside and there was a 30-foot tall wall of water and rocks and tree debris just coming at us, and it just knocked the house straight down with all of us in it, and we all got washed down river.
John's legs crushed by ceiling rafters. Rescuers using a pulley to bring him to safety over rushing floodwaters. Julie hasn't been seen since.
I crawled around screaming, looking for her, and I just couldn't find it.
This is just heartbreaking. It really makes you want to cry after watching John. John's wife is unaccounted for right now, unfortunately. Yeah, it's just, it's horrible. Hopefully his wife will be found. He looked pretty banged up. That's an English phrasal verb we could use. He had a lot of cuts on his face, but took out is another English phrasal verb. Here it means to destroy something completely. The hurricane took out several bridges, cutting off access to the town. We'll talk about cut off really soon. Crawled around, another English phrasal verb. In the picture, that baby is crawling, not walking. John was crawling around after the flood came through. It means to move on hands and knees slowly. Rescue workers crawled around the rubble looking for survivors.
Thousands of National Guard members have been activated, racing to get supplies to the region. FEMA handing out food and water, defending its response to the disaster.
We have continuously been moving resources into those impacted areas since the storm has passed. But we know that there's a lot of need.
We talked about the National Guard already, but we haven't talked about what it means. A group that helps during emergencies like storms or floods. The National Guard is part of our military. It usually focuses on protecting people in this country. They are not full time. Most members of the National Guard have other jobs that they do full time. They are only called up. That's the English phrasal verb. They are only called up when they are needed, like during emergencies. The National Guard arrived to help with the rescue efforts after the hurricane. A lot of states have their own National Guard, and you can see that truck says the North Carolina National Guard. They are distributing supplies to the people who need it. We have another acronym here, FEMA. What does that stand for? The Federal Emergency Management Agency, which helps people in the U.S. during big emergencies. FEMA sent aid to the areas hardest hit by the hurricane. In the news clip, they said that some people think that FEMA is not doing enough. They're not working hard enough. They're not doing it quickly enough. Here's a sentence. Some people say that FEMA isn't doing enough, or they are working too slowly. I mean, just my opinion here, but it's a big storm. A lot of people need help. Unfortunately, it is going to take time to get help to everyone who needs it. We saw the same thing after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. It was a big, devastating storm, and it took FEMA a long time to help everyone. The city of New Orleans was impacted the most by Hurricane Katrina. I mentioned cut off earlier. It means when a place is separated and no one can get in or out. In the picture, it looks like flooding has destroyed that bridge, so cars and trucks are no longer able to travel over that bridge. Let's use cut off in a sentence. Many towns were cut off from help after the roads flooded.
We know the Air National Guard has been working with FEMA. They've brought in more than 100,000 pounds of food and water. They know they need more as quickly as possible. They also plan to open more distribution centers for people who are cut off. In the meantime, President Biden is expected to touch down in North Carolina tomorrow.
Touch down. Another English phrasal verb. When something like a tornado or a plane lands on the ground. In the news clip, they said the president would be touching down in North Carolina in a few days. Here is an example sentence using touchdown. It's not actually true, just an example. The eye of Hurricane Helene touched down just outside Asheville. By the time Hurricane Helene went through or barreled through Asheville, it was no longer a hurricane. The winds were not that strong. It was the rain that devastated so much. Not a fun topic to talk about. So many lives were lost. So many other lives have been affected. I hope Asheville can get back on its feet really soon. Get back on its feet means to recover, to get better. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. If you would like to see that lesson on Speak English with Vanessa's channel and all of those really cool English teachers, it's right down there at the bottom. Thanks so much. See you next time.